so let's start with the bio. So Thoryn Stephens is a leading expert in neurotechnology, longevity, business, and web analytics with a specialization in data architecture, consumer insights, behavior analytics, and system optimization. He's founder of Brain.one, and a pioneering brain fitness platform featuring the world's most extensive collection of brain health, microhabits, and protocols. Thoryn, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Adam. How are we doing?
Oh man! All right, so I was on the site, I was doing my research, and this is super exciting. So we're going to go into it. We're going to do a deep dive, of course. But first off, I see founder. Like, were you always an entrepreneur? Where did that start?
I was pretty entrepreneurial from a young age. Yeah, that'd be fair. My formal background's in molecular and cell biology, and I began my career working in biotech, doing small molecule drug therapeutics, and that really set the foundation for my fascination around measurement of all kinds.
I find it very interesting when somebody that's very highly educated decides to go into being an entrepreneur. I'm not going to say why for all the entrepreneurs out there, but
Sure.
but like what drug you into this project? Like, how did Brain.one, how did that come about?
Yeah, so began my career in biotechnology, moved to LA in the early 2010s, and I had this weird skill set where I'd been working in biotech, and ultimately I needed to kind of reinvent my career, so I started off here in LA as a digital analyst. And that kind of, again, set the foundation where I was using different, I would say, structured, thinking around using data to drive insights, hypothesis testing, and rapid iteration of testing. And I applied that model to a number of industries here, focused in media, focused in e-commerce, and ultimately what I found is I could optimize any human behavior online. I could have people buy more videos, they could, buy more things online, and then ultimately it kind of came full circle and wanted to really define my purpose. And about 2 years ago, I was working with a group out of Columbia University called NeuroRights Foundation. NeuroRights' mission is neurological protection, or essentially protection of your neurological data. And going down that road, I was looking at longevity, and I thought longevity was a bit saturated, and there was this white space within brain and all things brain. And that was really the initial impetus to come back to my roots in science, and ultimately led to Brain.one.
How did you know that this was going to be a serious project for you? Because as entrepreneurs, as starting brands, like, we all have lots of ideas. And you said part of your background, but you worked through a lot of disciplines and a lot of different industries. Like, how did you know that this was going to be a serious project for you?
Yeah, again, working with NeuroRights, what we saw was the white space within brain. There was really no leader within brain relative to information. And then even more specifically, just the need within the public. There's a lot within longevity, but within brain specifically, just there wasn't really a market leader. And so that's what we began to go after. And what we began to see was that people are very concerned around, they're maintaining their brain function. And ultimately that led to the idea of starting to build brain and health protocols.
So now you have this idea, you're gonna proceed with it. Where do you go next? Like, talk about either building the protocols or what happened next.
Yeah, so I was training for a triathlon, so I've also been very active, and as I was training for triathlons, I was the most successful twofold. One is when I was following a structured framework. And so that was part of it. And with triathlon, you're looking at things like, again, nutrition, you're looking at your different micro habits or your exercises. And for me, what really put it over the top was measurement. And so many of the systems I've been building were focused around measurement. And what I saw through that process was by using things like a wearable and heart rate variability, I could begin to optimize my own biology, essentially. And it was through that process, and specifically when I began to use like HRV and heart rate, I could see I could attenuate my lactic threshold. And so as I was going down that road, I was actually training for the Malibu Triathlon a couple years ago, and that's really when we began to look at this idea of productizing human health and brain protocols, ultimately.
So all day long we've been hearing this thing about, and especially when the doctor panel was up earlier,
Sure.
and they were talking about, like, a lot of people don't want to change.
Yeah.
This concept of nudges,
Sure.
micro habits, like, I don't want to assume everybody knows what that is, myself included.
Yeah.
Like, go into that a little bit.
Yeah, human change is quite hard, and it generally starts with a purpose or something you're ultimately trying to change. And so our general focus is through change based on like incremental behaviors. And so you start small, and ultimately you nudge people, maybe there's gamification, and that would drive them to the broader holistic change fundamentally.
Can you give an example of that? Like what a nudge could be or something else like to change a habit?
Sure. Actually, let me run through maybe one of the protocols first, and then we'll come
Please.
full circle. So as we began to look at, again, the space within brain, I'm in my 40s, and I'm thinking about my own brain health. I'm thinking about my partners. I'm also thinking about my parents, and potentially children. And so in general, there is a concern, and specifically with people of my parents' generation, they're really thinking about dementia and Alzheimer's. And so the bottom line is dementia is preventable. And you guys, how many people have heard this, like that hypothesis that dementia is preventable? So a good number in the audience. So generally that's based on a study. It was the Lancet 2020 paper. And fundamentally it's based on, you would call them risk factors or behavioral modifications. And there's a set of 12, and it was recently expanded to 14. And these are small incremental behavioral changes that you can make to ultimately prevent dementia. And so these could be things like not smoking, it could be activity, it could be the level of activity, and so forth. And so as we were going down that road, we began to see that there was just this opportunity. And so what we've done is we built AIs, and we would feed in different papers essentially, and the papers would drive content, and then would also build a health protocol that we would then disseminate and give away for free. And that's really the foundation for Brain.one, so you can go and sign up and you would have access to these different health protocols that you can follow that again are based in these small incremental behavioral changes. So things like, again, your level of activity and the length of the activity and intensity and things of that nature. And so that's where we started with that one paper. We then continued to build the AI. We've gone from 5 to 10 to 250. We now have nearly 500 papers that we've fed into this thing, and these different protocols are now available. And we continue to see a lot of interest. And so that's one type of protocols that we've been building, again, based in this evidence or scientific based papers. And we're also seeing a lot of interest within just health influencers in general. And so as we built the platform, we're starting to share it with people and influencers here in LA. The question would be, would your audience want to see your health regimen and protocol? And every single one of them said yes, absolutely. And so that was additional white space that we saw. And so that idea, again, if you follow a health protocol or follow a health influencer, what is their protocol? And so we've been working with health influencers asking that very question, and then fundamentally would someone pay for it? Would they spend $1? Would they spend $5, $10, and so forth? So that's been really exciting. And then the third type of protocol are traditional protocols. So we've been building protocols based on ancient Indian Ayurvedic principles, or Shaolin based in China, or Zen and so forth. And of course I had to build one for Sparta. And so these traditional protocols are also very interesting. And then the final type of protocol are ultimately based in AI. And so the idea that you have multimodal inputs, and so those would be things like your self-report, and then we've already built in biometrics, and then we're working towards biomarkers. And this ultimately would recommend a health protocol tailored for you, Barbara, personalized to you as an individual that would recommend both microhabits and then also specific variables within the microhabits and the protocol itself. And we really think that is the future. And you can imagine, you can get up in the morning and you have your sleep data coming out of Aura, and you would actually have a health protocol that's tailored to you for that given day.
Oh, I love it. You mentioned influencers. There's a lot of brands in the audience. Some of them and health influencers have been mentioned multiple times today. Why do you think you've been, and Brain.one's been so successful forming these relationships? And how do you recommend people, dip into that pool if they haven't?
Yeah, I think with the health influencers, again, it's just an unmet need. We continue to hear that this just doesn't exist. If you guys follow health influencers, you know this. There's just really no, and I call it a structured framework to understand what they're doing. And so to break down a general protocol, you have different micro habits. And a micro habit, as an example, could be something like cold water immersion or cold plunging, and that would be one in a protocol of many. It also could include, again, nutrition, it could include supplementation, it could include peptides, and then of course, measurement. And so, really fulfilling an unmet need there within influencers in particular.
Take me through the user journey. Like I was on the website yesterday
Sure.
messing around with it and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm answering some questions. Like walk me through the user journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends, again, on the motivation of the consumer, but you can come to the site right now where we just came out of stealth. We're still in beta, so there's a wait list. But you basically just fill out a questionnaire, and then from that questionnaire, we would put you into a different persona, and then the persona would have a personalized protocol that's built for you, Adam.
And some of the questions were things like your goals, right? Like maybe give a couple of those so people understand.
Yeah, so obviously one of the most prevalent to many people probably in this room are things like sleep. So what are your goals? So sleep is one that comes up. It also could be your energy level, or fundamentally brain health. And we continue to come back to brain health as one of our major. Initially that's where we started. But because of the structured framework that we've built, again, you have the idea of the protocol, the micro habits, and then feedback loops. And that's the secret sauce is within the feedback loops. And there's different types of feedback loops. There's self-report, again, there's biometrics, and what we're now integrating are biomarkers. And so you could imagine that you're truly driving towards personalized, healthcare or a personalized protocol for you, which really is, the future. I don't think we've been able to fulfill it until now.
And so you mentioned let me make sure I heard this right. So you're just coming out of stealth mode, still in beta, or
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been in stealth for about a year, testing rigorously. We just opened up, still in beta. It's a closed beta, but if anyone's interested, happy to get you on the platform.
Did anything surprise you from like the tests and the betas and just the feedback of the current users? Any surprises?
Yeah, sure. So one surprise, I was at the Center for Brain Health. Does anyone here know the Center for Brain Health out of University of Texas? So they've been in the brain space for well over 20 years. And I was very honored to have dinner with their founder, Dr. Sandra Chapman. And we're having dinner at her house, and I explained the Brain.one platform and what we're building, and the idea of self-report and biometrics. And Sandra was like, "Yeah, Thoryn, that's interesting. We started there, but what we really found to be one of the most prevalent, essentially, micro habits or something that a human can do to really benefit their brain, and it's connection. And literally, it's events like this, like literally coming together with other humans, as well as purpose. And I know that sounds fundamental, but people lose that. In a lot
That
of
was one of the questions, right?
Yeah.
Like when you go into the
100%. Yeah.
I was wondering why that was there. I didn't expect it.
And so purpose and connection, and people that don't have connection, there's a direct link to Alzheimer's and dementia and so forth. So that was definitely one of the pleasant surprises that we found, and it just shows the importance of connection and being with people and ultimately coming together.
Oh, that's interesting. So walking through there, like say you're participating, that was one of your goals.
Sure.
In theory,
Yeah.
I believe there's wearables too yet, or no?
Oh yeah. We're fully integrated into Apple Health, Aura, Strava, Garmin.
So if that was one of your main goals, then you're like, you might get a nudge or something else, and you're like, oh, I gotta go with my buddies. I gotta go do something fun, right?
That's it. It could be for sure. Yep.
Wow, that's interesting. I like it.
Yeah.
So where are you at in the next steps of this? So you're mentioning you're going like how far until like the general public can get on board and.
So we initially went D2C, and we have a wait list, and we've been doing just a ton of user testing, just rigorously testing this thing, and then we actually just went B2B. So we have our first client actually based here in LA. They're called Cure in Malibu, and it's Dr. Lisa Benya. She's a functional medicine doctor. And it's really interesting. As we built this platform initially for brain, we've been seeing it really apply to a number of different areas of health. And so Dr. Benya in Malibu is actually using this for her clients. And as a quick example, so I live in Aspen, Colorado. During the winter, we ski every day. And 2 years ago, I broke my clavicle. And I went to the #1 orthopedic doctor in the country. It's called the Stedman Institute. Everyone goes there from the NFL and all the major sports players and so forth. And so I go into Stedman and I broke my clavicle, and they're like, okay, great, here you go, here's your treatment. And she threw me a sling and gave me a piece of paper which just had a couple things to do, relative to my rehabilitation. And I just thought that was so odd. There was no framework or anything. It was literally a piece of paper. And so I reached out to my audience or to my my close friends and so forth. And everyone's like, oh, collagen, bone broth, Totally, and exactly. That was like in the beginning of this idea. And so I began to build this protocol, essentially. And it also included some things a little bit experimental, like PEMF, if you guys are familiar. So it's electrical current, essentially, through the bone. I went back to Stedman in 4 weeks, and they did the X-ray, and the lead clinician was like, "Wow, it's amazing! Your bone is fused. What have you been doing?" And I was like, "Oh, nutrition." And she was like, "I never would have thought of that." And to me, it completely blew my mind that the number one doctor group in the country just wouldn't have thought of nutrition. And so that's when I knew we were onto something. And so we've been working with these different doctor groups and building these protocols ultimately for things across the board. And as another quick example too, I've met with 5 different doctors and nutritionists that want to use the platform for women's reproductive health as an example. So while we started with Brain, this idea of the structured framework, microhabits, protocols, feedback loops, it can really be applied to any dimension of human health.
I want to go back and jump around a bit to that AI engine and,
Sure.
and what you're feeding it. So I think you said over 500 studies were fed into it. Is that right?
Yeah,
Is
exactly.
that right?
So
Okay.
we started with a set of papers, and we've just been expanding. And so the idea is we're feeding in scientific papers, we're summarizing them, and again, that's generating AI-driven content, and then also protocols. And then we have a neuroscientist, PhD from Oxford, that's the human in the loop, and they're verifying every single protocol, every single piece of content that we publish. So at least there is some human validation there. But yeah, it's been quite interesting. And as we've been doing our user testing, I kind of did the content secondarily, but the humans love the content, and they keep coming back to that in particular. So it kind of goes back to one theme that I've heard here, misinformation. There's such distrust of science, and this is one mechanism that we've built, and it's not foolproof. We know that, but at least it's a step in the right direction to use the scientific process, in driving good content for the masses fundamentally.
And so that content for the masses, so they're taking these scientific papers.
Yep.
I'm not going to say you're making them simpler, but more digestible so that everybody can read them. So I don't have a huge science background, but I'd be able
Sure.
to get this information. I'd be able to read it. I'd be able to understand it. I'd
Yep.
be able to program my nudges, and then I would get my whatever my protocol was. It's like, oh, time to do that.
Totally. It's pretty nerdy. So we're taking one paper, we're feeding it into one AI, and then we're generating the summary. We're then, out of that, we're generating a keyword list. We're then feeding that keyword list into another AI. We're generating the citation and the imagery, and that's kind of the basis, essentially, for the content, along with the actual health protocol itself.
That's awesome. How does that sound? That's fun. So I do want to get the audience involved here and have some fun here too with the audience. So any questions? Questions, thoughts on this? There we go. Yeah. Awesome.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So we have been finding our papers internally and ultimately from our scientific advisory board and our medical advisory board. So it's really just recommendations. And then it's a very social platform. So you could submit a paper if you wanted it summarized. You could also submit microhabits. And that's also been really interesting too, because we're getting some of these, not odd, but just interesting microhabits from all over the world of, how people are measuring different things or.
You gotta give one. You gotta give one.
Yeah, one. Okay, actually, I have two. I have two quick ones. So one, we have a woman who, we ran her through the platform. She's like, wow, my grandfather measured his, essentially cognition by doing the New York Times Thursday crossword puzzle every week. And how quickly he could actually do the crossword puzzle is ultimately, that was a reflection of his cognition. So I thought that was interesting. One other quick one, we were training for the Malibu Triathlon. So we did a Brain.one, essentially team. This was last season. We had about a dozen athletes from all over the country that came and raced with us. And one of my buddies, Dean, came down from San Francisco, and his micro habit was cordyceps worms. And so literally they came, they're really expensive. He had a jar, they're about $1,000, these cordyceps worms, where you actually see the worms are about this long, and there's a fruiting body coming out of the head of the worm, and that was his supplement, essentially, for the race, and he won his age group first place. Wow. So does it work? I don't know, but that's why we built the platform to ultimately try to, really capture this empirical data.
That's amazing. So where do we get these worms?
I've got a source for you. They're not cheap though, thousands of dollars literally for these worms.
Wow, but it was worth it. You won.
Yeah.
Amazing. Man. Any other questions? Oh, okay.
These ones were for China, but I'm sure they're from Sudan as well. Oh, cool. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
Love it. Any final questions? No, there we go.
Oh, 100%. Yes, we'd love to chat. And you can actually submit in our chat bot any ideas and recommendations, and we can reach out to you. And yeah, we'd love to discuss for sure. And that's what we're seeing both on the protocol side as well as the micro habits. And so there's this whole social component around what we're building. And the vision is to build the largest health and micro habit database in the world, ultimately, across multiple cultures and disciplines. And there seems to be a lot of excitement around that. So.
It seems like that would also build like the adoption, right? Like the more people involved, the more they hear about it, the more
Exactly.
they spend, and then also just the longevity of them staying with it because they feel like, I mean, I don't have anything cool, but if I did, I'd submit it.
That's cool, yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely an element of citizen science. Like we were building these ancient Indian Ayurvedic, essentially protocols, and my team, who's primarily based in India, they're like, Thoryn, like how do we know if these work? And I mean, these are like in the Bhagavad Gita, these like some of these micro habits are thousands of years old, but that's why we built the platform because this ultimately allows us the data collection to see whether or not fundamentally, these different micro habits and these different protocols actually work. So that's very exciting.
That's fun. Anyone else? Oh, there we go.
Sure.
Are there any things that stand out or any patterns or things that work across cultures or as far as like even things like preventing Alzheimer's or dementia that you can start doing at an earlier age? You can do all this work. It's a process.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, fundamentally you take a step back and, whether it's Peter Attia or Huberman or different cultures and societies, the similarities are around activity, the similarities are around nutrition, the similarities are around connection. And I know that sounds like a little bit, maybe trivial, but it's like those are the major patterns that we see, and if you oversimplify it, it's in those areas, I would say. There's definitely not per se, I don't want to, give to you empirically, but let's chat in a year and we'll definitely have more data, and I'd be happy to share those insights.
Amazing. I agree. Yeah. Anyone else? All right.